Hey there, dear tech fam. Today we are diving into the world of cybersecurity, compliance, entrepreneurship, and leadership with a very special guest, Lori Crooks. Lori is the founder of Cadra, a company focused on making cybersecurity compliance more approachable, understandable, and human. Lori didn't start out in tech. In fact, she dreamt of being a doctor or a teacher, but through a series of twists and turns, she found herself in IT auditing and never looked back. We dive into her journey, what made her leave the traditional corporate world, and the real story of building a business from the ground up. Not just the glamorous version, but the messy and hard, rewarding reality. We also talk about why compliance is more than just a checkbox, how small businesses are especially vulnerable, and why making cybersecurity approachable could be the difference between staying protected and becoming tomorrow's headline. We get personal too. We talk about leadership philosophies, surviving the early years of business ownership, post COVID remote work shift, and the human cost of compliance. Also, we talk about our dogs and Harry Potter. This one is packed with real stories, tactical advice, and hard earned lessons. Let's get into it. All the research and everything I did, I had a question that I was going to ask you, but then I listened to one of the
Yeah.
podcasts, and so I'm not going to ask the question I was going to ask, and I'm going to ask, how'd you end up in auditing? Because my question was, were you like super into technical stuff when you were younger? But from what I've listened to, that wasn't the case, and you kind of fell into it. So how did you end up in this world?
Yeah, like you said, I just kind of fell into it. My degrees were all in finance, and accounting, and I quickly got tired of crunching numbers. So I kind of went into initially working for the state of Georgia and doing financial accounting, and auditing, and I just got tired of it really quickly. And they were hiring literally upstairs, at the state of Georgia for somebody to help with IT auditing, and they took me under their wings and taught me how to do it, and I just haven't looked back. It's always changing, it's always interesting. So, yeah, it's not what I grew up but wanting to do, but it's been good.
What did you want to be when you were little?
Oh my gosh, I wanted to be like in the medical field, like a physical therapist or a doctor, that type of thing. So, or a teacher. So,
Yeah,
nothing related to this.
I feel like, but as a kid, we get like four or five archetypes, right? You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be
Yep.
a cop or something. I thought I wanted to be a
Yes.
doctor until I saw like a lot of blood for the first time, and it wasn't even a
Yeah.
lot, right? And I was like, that's not it.
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
That I could do
Yeah.
it.
All right. So now you're a business owner. So when did you know that
Yes.
corporate life wasn't like a going to be the rest of your life? And I feel like deciding to own a bit to start a business is very daunting, and then all of a sudden realize, like, because you also talked about wanting to be kind of flexible with your time, but when you start a business, those first few years you're not flexible with your time. So
Right.
when did you realize at least that corporate life wasn't it?
Yeah, I had a boss who required us to be in our seats from 9 to 5, no matter whether we had work to do or not. We just had to be there. We had to be visible. We had to be, and this is free, everyone working remotely too, but we had to be in our seats 9 to 5, didn't matter whether we had work to do or not. And I'm like, this is just not for me. Like I get my work done quickly. If I have nothing to do, then I don't want to sit there and pretend like I have stuff to do. I just want to be done and do my own thing. So that I think that's really when I started to be like, I don't think this is for me. It still took me quite a few years after that to actually go out on my own. But yeah, that was the start of it for sure.
Yeah, I think bosses that are more process focused rather than goal like result oriented do that to a lot of people,
Yes.
which is, I mean, it's good because we have a lot of business owners, but I think a lot of people that are good at what they do and they do it quickly, they're like, my goal is to get the job done, not look
Mhm.
like I'm doing something, right? So I 100%
Exactly.
resonate with that. And then, all right, so, and I'm not going to talk about it yet, but I have some insight into cybersecurity. You say that, people don't think of the word approachable, but that is a word that you use when you talk about your company making cybersecurity more approachable. Um, how do you do that, and where does that vibe come from?
Yeah, it comes from not, I think for me, not having a tech background. And so I like to try to take what I know of tech and translate it into more kind of easy speak, easy jargon, because not everyone understands it. So I try to make it easy for people, especially if they are. either really tech focused or really management focused, just trying to bridge the gap between the two because I've seen over the years that it's either one or the other. There's nobody kind of like in between trying to explain to both people, this is why you need cybersecurity compliance and this is how you become compliant in a way that everyone understands.
Yeah. So the word approachable. So I back in, I think it was like 2017, I joined a company and our goal was to try to do cybersecurity staffing. So we were trying to start a cybersecurity arm for the entire company globally.
Okay.
That was excuse me, that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life because everyone's a bit paranoid in the cyber world. So I'd have like a conversation with a CISO, great conversation. I'm like, hey, I'll email you some documents. They're like, oh yeah, we don't take emails from external, like from outside of the company. And for me as a salesperson, it's a nightmare. I'm like, all right, well, how do I get this to you? And he's like, I don't know, right?
Right.
So I feel like the word approachable, it's definitely not from the outside. So it's really cool that that's what you focus on and you help people get in there, because it's very hard to understand. It's a, for lack of a better word, it's a thankless job, right? If you do
Mhm.
your job right, nothing changes, and
Exactly. Yeah.
people don't get why that's so important. But all right, but let's go back into building this business. So, what are some assumptions that you had before you started a business of what you thought you were going to be doing and what it's going to be like, and what was the difference? Like, what ended up happening from there?
Yeah, I think you kind of assume when you go into it, oh, this is going to be maybe a little bit hard, but it'll be easier than I thought. Once I kind of get the first client or two, it's going to be easy goings from there. But what I've quickly realized, it's not. It's always, at least for me, it's always a little bit of a struggle to kind of get the sales and the revenue and, know the right time to bring on people and staff internally. Because you need to make sure, obviously, you have enough sales in place to kind of staff internally as well. So I thought I would probably be out of it and more managing the company a couple years into it. And it's still kind of, I'm still doing a lot of hands-on stuff as I grow the company as well. So it's a lot of hats to wear. And like I said, I think would go through it quicker, but for me, it's just been a slow growth, which is fine, but not as quick as I thought.
Yeah, and so like in terms of the business that you do going into it, because I feel like compliance for smaller companies, there are probably more gaps than one realizes, especially because big companies have so many people doing compliance for them. Smaller companies think they're covered and they're really not. So did you start your business and start looking at these smaller companies and be like, oh my gosh, it's a lot worse than I thought, or was it just about what you were expecting?
Yeah, I definitely say a little bit of both, to be honest. There are some small companies that unfortunately they rely on an IT provider, which is fine, but they don't know that they have to check the IT provider. So the IT provider is supposed to be in charge of, encrypting laptops and making sure antivirus is on laptops, but they don't go in and do those checks. And so I found more cases than not that not always that the IT provider's not always doing what they should be doing. So the laptops are encrypted, VPNs encrypted, those types of things, and that always makes me a little concerned of, okay, how can we help you do the checks for the IT provider because they're not obviously doing what you said and you've been paying this person for a while. So I've run into that a couple of times, which is a little discouraging because you don't want anybody to be taken advantage of. And then you have some smaller companies that are a little bit more focused on cybersecurity, but unfortunately they just don't have the staffing to keep up with it.
Yeah, I think, and it's not again, compliance is like it's a box you check for a lot of companies,
Mm.
and as long as
Yes.
they can figure out how to check the box, whether or not it's actually been done to the depth of which that they should, it's
Mhm.
gonna they're gonna miss it because their goal is to supply as many clients as possible rather than like deep diving into, and especially a client that's
Yes.
not huge. And so I was speaking to someone about, and it was a different kind of compliance, but they were talking about being compliant. I forgot what the term was, but either way, the point was that just because you check off all the boxes doesn't mean it's actually compliant, right? You can just check them off, and so when would you rather? Because right now, a lot of IT service providers are compliance is on the list of things that they do. Would you rather them take that off and always be like, you should get a third party person to handle this, just to ensure that everyone's taken care of? Or do you think the flip side where the IT provider should just do a better job?
That's a good question. Um, I feel like if they're not going to do it right, then it's probably not for them. then they need to have somebody else do it. Or they need to have their own checks in place where they get like a SOC report or they're actually becoming compliant, and somebody's checking them to make sure that they're doing their job. But yeah, if they're not going to do it right, then, you know, they should just do what they're hired to do and stay away from compliance and have somebody else do it, I think.
Yeah, but money, it's so fun to just add that on and get paid for it,
I
right?
know.
It's
Exactly.
it's and again, like what I said earlier, where it's like it's a thankless job. Like, as no one's gonna get hacked. No one thinks they're gonna get hacked. No one thinks they're gonna get audited.
Yep.
And it's always that's a story, because I remember when I was doing the sales, we kept going to these companies like, oh, like what are y'all doing? It's like, no, we're good, like everything's fine. And this was in Dallas, Texas, and this was 2017. This was when GDPR was coming out in Europe. And my
Okay.
company is a global company, so my boss's idea was like, well, what there's a lot of American companies that would need to comply. Let's try to figure that out. Mind you, trying to sell GDPR in the US to Texans, not a thing, not a
No.
thing. It was excruciating. It was so excruciating, and
Oh, I can't even
I
imagine.
I have I have nightmares about it. But um, the point being, though, it wasn't a bad idea, right? The idea was actually great, because he wasn't talking to
Mhm.
Texas companies. He was talking to global companies like
Yep.
Novartis and like bigger companies. But you're still talking to Texans, and they don't understand the
Yeah.
point here about that. So yeah. Anyway, um, so can you tell me about the first year of building your company, Cadra? Am I pronouncing that right? Cadra. Um,
Yes.
what if you were today gonna write a letter to yourself starting the company, first year, first month, whatnot? You get one sticky note, right? I think I have one here somewhere. Yeah, you have a sticky note, and you can put as much stuff on there
Yes.
as you want, right? What are the bullet points you're passing to yourself in your first year?
Yeah, I'd say the top thing is don't put all your eggs in one basket. I made that mistake early on with, one or two major contracts, and they were great for a while. And then when those contracts ended suddenly, then I was kind of back in the beginning. So definitely diversify, or put your eggs in a lot of different baskets. So when one company decides to leave, then it's not the end of the
Yeah.
world, so to say. So definitely that, hire help as early as you can, either like sales help or project management help, or internal help as well. I said those are probably my two biggest things. And then make sure you're putting enough money aside for taxes.
Yeah. I I think everyone needs to get that one, because it's the last
Yes.
thing you think about. And yeah, it's huge. All right, so you've spent a lot of your career, most of your career, in a space that isn't known for its diversity, and especially like when it comes to women in technical leadership roles. It's more of a thing. It's growing very much so.
Mhm.
Lately, it's been great, but I'm sure when you started, wasn't a thing. So, what was it like for you early on, and how was that the beginning, and then how did it evolve to where it is now, and now being in a room and where you're the authority on this on compliance, and you're speaking to a group that may not, again, be not as diverse, and establishing authority and going from there. But how was it in the beginning, early days?
Yeah, it was tough. I've been in the industry about 20 years now. So I've definitely seen it grow, which is awesome. Definitely see a lot more diversity now when I started. I think I lucked out at the beginning. I did have a female, manager who was just awesome and kind of took me under her wing. So at least I had that initial kind of connection to somebody else, that looked like me in the industry, which was great. But even up to like a couple years ago, I went to a major conference and I looked down the speaker list and it was all males. I'm like, you can't tell me there aren't any females, in this area that are management CEOs, that could speak to something. So, it's still a little discouraging that we're not there, but also I'm trying to help, um, women in cybersecurity and try to mentor where I can to kind of help other women come up and kind of figure out their plans and where they fit into it as well. So it's been a learning experience on how to kind of speak my not my truth, but try to speak to a room full of all men, and make myself feel and be authoritative, where sometimes they might not think that I am, just based on how I look. So it's been a learning experience, been challenging at times, but like I said, I'm definitely seeing more and more females come up into the industry now, and I'm trying to mentor some as well. So I think the future's bright. It's just a matter of kind of getting there and getting over some of these hurdles that we face.
Yeah. And so what when you because my thing is like being a woman in tech in general, just working the job is
Yep.
hard on its own just because based on what we spoke about. But when you're again running a business in tech, it's a whole other set of because let's even take tech out of it. Women led businesses have their own set of challenges outside of that. So now you kind of put
Mhm.
not a hat on a hat, but it's like two challenges in one. So that
Yeah.
first year, and the reason I want to go into first year, there's like a crazy stat, right? Like 90% of businesses fail their first year. So like
Mhm.
that first year was key to one, like making sure your mental health was okay, right? Because it probably was a
Yeah.
lot. But then also making sure revenue and everything is working business wise and moving forward. So, what was there like a, let's say like an aha moment in that year where you were like, because you knew you could do the job. That's not the question, but the question is running the business. So,
Yeah.
what was your aha moment that first year of being like, I can navigate this?
Yeah. Um, I think it was probably about 6 months in, when I was finishing one contract and had another contract lined up. It was kind of like, okay, I can do this. I have some of the right connections in place. I know the right people to kind of keep me busy, and kind of build that network a little bit more. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I have a little bit of a network. I have, another contract lined up after my first contract, finished. And so I was able to kind of bridge that gap in between the two. And I was like, okay, yes, maybe I can do this, because I'm not going to be sitting around doing nothing for 6 months. I actually have things lined up and in the pipeline. I think that was probably the point. I was like, okay, yes, I think I could do this. I just need to keep building that network and keep putting myself out there.
Yeah. And then how were you going about at that time, like finding the new contracts? Was it all your network? Were there some like companies you were hiring to look for business or like what, or was just pure networking?
A lot of it was just networking at that point in time. I had worked for several major industries up until that point. And so I knew quite a few people. And then so I just reached out where I could, of like, hey, do you know anybody that needs help? Let me fit in. I do such a niche thing when it comes to like technical writing and policy procedure and kind of helping build security programs, that, I was able to find that people that want to write policies and procedures. And so I was able to kind of put myself into a lot of companies being like, hey, at least let me write your policy procedure documents. I know you don't want to, let me help you do that. So it was kind of reaching out to those people that I built over the years. And then I just continued going to events as I could, and just kind of continue the networking part of it.
Yeah, networking is huge. I think networking is
It
huge, but it's
is.
become such a buzzword, and I feel like the what networking has become now is like people think it's kind of like okay, so bad example, maybe not, maybe it is, but it's like when you go to bars to like find a date or like to find someone, but
Mhm.
you're just there
Yeah.
drinking and just sitting around and just that's it. That's not like you're not going to meet anyone that way. You're just going to get really drunk, right, and
Right.
then just go home and be
Yeah.
upset, or find someone that's not the right person for you because you're not doing the right things,
Yes.
right? Same thing in networking. A lot of people just go out to like a bunch of events, which is good, right? I think as many events you go
Yeah.
to, get exposure. You also practice talking, which is I think important because the first time you get to a network event, someone's like, "What do you do?" You just ramble for however long.
Yeah.
But I think very, and it sounds like exactly what you did, very like dedicated networking of knowing exactly why you're in the room, what you're trying to say, and what you're trying to get. Um, it's something to be addressed because right now, especially post COVID, when everything opened up, networking events were, because I remember back in pre COVID, we'd probably, if I was on like any networking app, you'd get like two or three relevant ones per week, maybe probably like two, right?
Right.
Now it's like 14 every single week for any industry you're looking for. It's just been crazy. And a funny thing was this, my friend started doing this at the end of the night. She'd come up to like people and be like, how did you do? Like, how was the networking event for you in terms of like, did you actually find people that were relevant for you? And when you actually do that check at the end, you realize that you might need to cut down, or you might need to change up what you're doing, because you're like, no, I just had 3 drinks and spoke to like 2 people. That was it.
Right.
A lot of similar activities, networking and going out to bars, but right.
Yes.
Uh,
I like the analogy.
especially since a lot of these now, a lot of these events will either charge you money and give you free drinks, or charge you money. It's the same. It's speed dating,
Yeah.
platonic
Yeah.
platonic speed dating. Um,
Yes. Yes. I was thinking the same thing when you started. I was like, yeah, it's kind of like speed
yeah,
dating.
it's but sometimes you get lucky, because I've had some of those nights where I did nothing spectacular, but I did meet interesting people that were business
Right.
relevant.
Yep.
So you talked about like how you're trying to help other women in the industry come up. And so what general advice do you give girls coming into, I shouldn't say girls, women coming into tech right now? Or even, girls in terms of like college or high school, because
Hmm.
STEM is now, not even now, probably for the last decade, been very popular. And that's a really good thing. But
Yeah.
navigating into the job world, turning a master's in, let's say engineering, into an actual job that is of that level, rather than getting the master's and still coming up as a junior employee. So like, what advice would you give women coming in the industry and girls trying to get into that post college, post high school?
Yeah, I'd say coming into the industry, I think it's important to kind of know where you want to go in cybersecurity first, because it's such a wide and large industry. You could be on the really tech side, you could do coding and development, you could do, what I do, audit assessment. So kind of finding your niche, but also kind of once you get into it is just not being afraid of who you are and what you have to say. Like make sure that you're maintaining your voice as you are talking to people above you, below you, etc. So making sure again that you know who you are, and owning that, because I think that's important. As far as girls growing up and getting into it, I think it's such a great industry to get into. It's such a, like I said, there's so much variety, but it's always changing. It's always exciting. So if you are a lifelong learner, you love to learn, you love change. I think cybersecurity is a great area to get into it because it's always changing, it's always growing, and it's not going to be something that's going to be steady. But there's always going to be a need for it. So I think it's a great, great area to get into, and a great thing to learn, just job security at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
No, and I was gonna say that you're based on what you were saying, because you said early on, like people weren't really trying to write all this compliance stuff, and it was a great place to be. I think about it, and I'm like, so I think 2017, which is when I started getting into cyber at that time, I think Equifax just got hacked, or they got hacked that year. I think it was 2017, or it might have been late 2016. I can't remember exactly, but before that, I think cyber divisions were a little bit smaller in general, because again, if it's something you don't think about, there's no funding,
Mhm.
right? And so
Right.
it's always like the CISO's always having to fight for money. And I remember
Yeah.
speaking to someone later that year, and they were a CISO, and they reported into finance, as opposed to a lot of CISOs at that time were reporting into operations, COO. And I was like, well, that's very weird that you're reporting into the CFO. And he was like, well, yeah, but I can't report into the COO. He's the one making my life hard. Like his department, right, is fucking up all of the stuff that we're
Right.
doing, and I can't tell him that he's not doing his job well or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I had to, and that was a very interesting thing, because I don't think companies are doing that a lot now. But I'm like, that makes so much sense, because you report
Yeah.
into the money because you need it, and you can't, and you're the best
Right.
person to justify it rather than having a
Yeah.
middleman. And I was just thinking, I was like, that's really interesting. With that being said, and I want to get into like the depths, the meat of compliance, and I will in a second, but I do want to ask, being compliant while developing. So a lot of these companies develop all this cyber, like all this code that have holes in it, and you have to go in and
Mhm.
fix it. Have you gotten the opportunity to be there earlier in the development process, or earlier in the company's life cycle, and say, hey, let's start with compliance, so you don't have to come back and spend even more money? Have you gotten that opportunity? Do you think companies are thinking about that while developing yet, or is it going to take another decade?
Uh, I think it's starting to get there, if I'm being honest. I think people are starting to realize a little bit more that, hey, if we're developing, we need to do it properly up front, and have those kind of checks and balances in the code, making sure people are approving it, etc. Um, but that's probably some of the larger companies. Some of the smaller companies, they just don't have the manpower or the knowledge to know, hey, I need to have a second person approve this before I put it into production, or I need to run these code analysis tools on this before it goes into production. So I see it getting there with larger companies, but with smaller ones, unfortunately, just not yet.
I remember we made this like slide deck, and we had these charts of explaining how if you start with compliance, you'll save X amount of money, and everyone was so they agreed and they loved it, and this was great. And when the time came, they were like, "No, we will not be changing anything that we're doing, because we won't save this money unless we get if we get audited. Yeah, we saved a bunch of money,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So speaking of
Yep.
which, most people they know what an audit is in terms of taxes, no idea what a compliance audit is. Can you give me the actual meat and potatoes of compliance audits, and like what's the human cost of getting it wrong?
Yeah, so depending on the type of data that you have, we'll kind of take a step back without trying to get too deep into it. But depending on what type of data you have to go through a certain audit. So, for example, if you have a whole lot of credit card information, you might have to go through a PCI audit. If you have healthcare information, you might have to go through a HIPAA audit. If you are reporting to, if you're a public company, you're going to have to go through some type of audit as well. And so, again, depending on what type of data you are, you have to go through an audit. And that means there's a certain standard that or rule book that you have to follow. And you're going to have an independent third party come in and assess you against that. And so that's really where we had come in when I was working for a public accounting company, audit company, is we would go into them and say access control is something you check, you look through and make sure everyone has proper access, making sure people have background checks, making sure that we're checking, like you said, checking all the boxes off, but making sure that the organization meets the rule book or the compliance standard that they have to meet for that moment in time. If you're not following what you're supposed to be doing, there are consequences, especially around like co-development, since we're on that subject. Co-development, if you're not having somebody review it, approve it, if you're not limiting access, there are certain audits that you can completely just, I wouldn't say fail, but you could be what's called a qualified opinion, which basically means you failed. That's just a nice way of saying you failed. And so that means your customers aren't going to trust you because they can't trust the code and the application is being handled appropriately. So there's possibly a loss of customers. There's possibly a loss of trust, which you can't really quantify, but also there are fines for some of the compliance standards if you are not following appropriately. So you could lose customers and you could have fines in place.
So who does the so I know like a lot of companies will hire external companies to do an audit to make sure they're compliant so that they don't get actually who's doing the actual audits that will cause like actual repercussions.
So there are a lot of CPA firms are doing like your SOC audits. They also kind of do the HIPAA and PCI. Some of them have multiple hats. Um, so it depends on the type of audit you have. If you're having a PCI, then you need to look for what's called a QSA firm, a qualified security assessor firm, to do it because they have been accredited or certified to actually perform the audits. Same thing with SOC audits. You need to have the organization has to have a certain standard an accreditation in place to actually perform the audit. So the auditors themselves have to go through training. The firm has to go through a process to make sure that they are validated to perform the audit.
And who
So everybody has to go through
yeah, no,
it.
but and then who do they pass the data up? Like what's the secure like cyber equivalent of like the IRS? Like who's the governing body like in America? Do we have like one governing body for all of cyber audits?
No, we don't, which is a little bit tough. We have NIST, which is kind of the National Institute of Standard and Technology. They do a lot of documentation and program setting around cybersecurity, but there's no like authoritative body that says everybody has to follow all of this. Like I said, it really comes down to the data that you have, and then you have to report up to that data body. So like FTC they're responsible for like all the small tax and accounting firms. PCI is responsible for all the people who are doing payment cards, so unfortunately there's not, which makes it a little bit tough for organizations who are trying to be like, okay, I know I need to be compliant, but I don't really have credit card data, I don't have healthcare information. So they're trying to figure out, okay, what can I follow to kind of have some sort of compliance standard to follow? But I don't have to meet any of these other ones, so it is tough not having that authoritative body.
Is this the topic of discussion within like the cybersecurity world of creating something like this, or is this, or everyone's just like like with doing what they've done with cyber forever, like it's not broke, don't fix it type of deal?
Yeah, I think you have certain people who are trying to, but it's tough, and I haven't really seen like a I've seen attempts to try to meld some of these various standards together into one, and it never seems to work for some reason.
Okay, well, I mean,
Yeah,
eventually,
it's a good question.
eventually it might. I mean, my thing is, so it's it seems like I'm gonna use asterisks and quotes and everything because I go out of my way not to be political on these shows, but it seems like the United States is heading towards a more tech savvy route from the government perspective, or it wants to. It's posing itself to do that. Whether or not it's doing it is a whole other conversation. I'm hoping that we continue this after, in the next 8, 12, how many ever years, where we are actually very, the country is like tech focused because, when you look at history prior to the last, 30, 40 years, tech wasn't really a thing that the government had to worry about. Even when
Mhm.
Facebook came out, like it wasn't thinking about it. And then all of a sudden a decade ago, they were like, oh, we need to start regulating things. And with all those things being said, I think eventually you have to get to this state where you're like, all right, we need to figure out how to make sure all the companies in our country are doing something one way or another. Um, I guess similar to what GDPR was for Europe overall, but we
Mhm.
don't have an equivalence, do we yet?
No, California has their own privacy act, the CCA, but that's about it for privacy. NIST has come out with some privacy regulations. They always kind of had a privacy standard, but now they've kind of imported it into or incorporated it into their latest 853, which people use for a lot of different standards. But outside of that, there's nothing
Yeah.
throughout the yeah.
All right. So you mentioned NIST. So I'm over here. I'm looking. See, you're working on frameworks like FedRAMP, NIST, CMMC. So like, what can you give us an idea of what those frameworks are, and then like what are the impacts on like average tech teams? Like what does that look like? And feel free to get into the nitty
Yeah.
gritty and nerdy because like most of my
Okay.
listeners are within tech, so like that's what they want to know about.
Okay, perfect. I'm like, I never want to go too deep because people get bored. But yeah, so FedRAMP, going back to kind of the governing body. So FedRAMP is actually for any software company that has a product in the cloud that wants to sell to a federal agency. So there's FedRAMP, there's Project Management Office, but they work directly with the federal agencies. And then those agencies, again, work if they want to buy a software that's in the cloud, they have to make sure that that software program goes through the FedRAMP authorization process. So FedRAMP is based on that NIST 853 that I was talking about. And there's different security categorization levels depending on the type of data that the software company holds. And it's quite a thorough process. There's, I think, for a moderate security categorization, which most organizations are, there's like 350 controls that you have to have in place, including policies, procedures. They have what's called a system security plan, which is basically your Bible of how you have all these controls implemented. Throughout the organization. So, all of that has to be documented, and you have to have all the controls implemented to some sort of level before you can actually go through your third party audit. And that's done by what's called a 3POW, a third party assessment organization. Um, and so the third party assessment organization will do the audit of all these 350 controls, look at the documentation, And then they'll kind of offer an opinion on whether they think that program is ready for authorization or not. And then they'll pass it on to the federal agency who will review it, and then it'll go up to the FedRAMP PMO. So quite the process, and we kind of help the organizations with the documentation and kind of figure out the gap assessments before it actually gets to the audit and help them prepare. So that's FedRAMP. That one is, like I said, mainly from directed from the government. And there's also State RAMP, which is related. They're kind of doing the same thing, but that's for state-focused agencies and local agencies, stuff like that. And then also, since we're talking about government, you have CMMC, which is kind of the hot topic these days, and that is the cybersecurity maturity certification. I'm forgetting the M there, but it's a DoD standard. So DoD has come out with their own specific standard for any of their suppliers or third-party organizations or subcontracts. They have flow down clauses. So anyone who might work down the way from a DoD, be a DoD supplier, even if you're three or four, parts removed, you still have to comply with this CMMC, which is similar to FedRAMP, but it's a little less intense from a control standpoint. It's based off of the NIST 800-171, which is only 110 controls
Only.
versus 350, so a little bit
Yeah.
less. But same sort of thing. You have to write all the policies, procedures. You have to write that system security plan. You have to implement those controls, and then you have to go through a third party audit as well. Or at least most of the people do for that one. So that's CMMC. And then when you deal with like SOC and HIPAA, again, those are just depending on the type of data that you have. It's SOC is pretty standard because those reports go to the customers. So it's kind of like an independent report of how your security controls are in place. And customers like to get those to make sure everything is in place. So I know a lot of information, but
Yeah.
hopefully that helps.
No, for sure. Well, so and you mentioned customers finding out, and if you fail an audit, you mentioned this before, and you just mentioned customers now. Who tells? How do they find out, or how long does it take for them to find out that you failed an audit, or that like, because I feel like a lot of times companies or customers don't always react to these things as often as we think. It's like, oh, they failed an audit. It's like, okay, like, what does that mean for me? And they don't really think about it. So how does it
Yeah.
get to the customers? And then like, how long does it take, do you think, before they actually start reacting to the information?
Honestly, it depends on how in depth the customers do their research.
So never. So it never
The
gets to them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to be like, "Hey, we failed the audit." They might send the report, and the report might say, "Hey, this is a qualified opinion." But if the customer doesn't know to read
Yeah.
that, that opinion is qualified. They might be like, "Yeah,
It's
sure,
like, yeah,
great,
it's
everything
qualified,
got
right?
the report, check the
Yeah.
box." Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we checked the box, we got the report, it's
Yeah.
all good. But yeah, so they have to do their due diligence and around vendor management and third party management as well.
Yeah, I think they should change the name of that from qualified,
Yeah, I know it's very
like
confusing.
qualified opinions. Like, no, unqual. Like they fucked up. Like that's not.
Right.
um, okay, and then so with all of the different frameworks and everything going on right now. So there's two questions I want to get to. I wrote one down. I didn't write the other one, so I'll tell you the other one first. It's a lot of everyone has every so far government body or everybody that's doing these things have an opinion. They have things that they want. You mentioned 300 plus controls, 100 plus controls, all those great things. What's the biggest gap in compliance? Like what's maybe not the biggest gap, but I'm sure that there's some things that the government isn't thinking about, or things that are just being missed, or things that don't have the right amount of weight behind it. So what's the biggest gap right now in terms of compliance and the frameworks out there?
Um, Probably go to the topic we just talked about, and this is a new control set for the latest NIST version, but really around supplier management. As I just mentioned, it's really up to the customer to do their due diligence on their vendors. And prior to it being a requirement in this latest standard, people weren't doing it, but it's still kind of a check the box type of thing. Um, Vendors are such a huge, 'cause, like I said, it's a new standard. So it's kind of a check the box type of thing. Vendors are such a huge, 'cause, like I said, it's a new standard. So it's kind of a check the box type of thing. Um, vendors are such a huge part hole for a lot of organizations, and that's where some of the, I wouldn't say more recent, but breaches probably about 8, 10 years ago were, it was because the vendor had access or more access to the environment that they probably should have, and they were able to break in or steal data that they probably shouldn't have had access to in the first place. So it's really around, vendor management, making sure access is correct for those. But I think just access in general, especially for large organizations, and this is something that, again, the government they have a control for, but it's really up to the organization to make sure that they're managing that access appropriately. On top of that, and then there's a new focus on encryption as well, which I think is good, is making sure things are appropriately encrypted. Um, I think some of the laws are still probably not 100% there, or they're almost too stringent where the business can't do it because of their technology. Like they'd have to spend tons of money to upgrade to the newest thing to get to that encryption level. And so that's been tough on kind of businesses, is like, where's this happy median where we're meeting the control, but also we're not breaking our own systems, trying to get to this level of encryption that we just can't meet right now because of our technology limitations.
Yeah, well, when you're too stringent, then people are just okay with not doing it. They're like, all right, well,
Exactly. Yeah, they're going to look for
yeah.
workarounds.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's the story of any time, like whether or not anyone likes policy, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions on different policies and everything.
Yeah.
If the policy doesn't exist, I think there's an issue because then anyone can do anything. But if it's too stringent,
Yes.
people will try to do a workaround. I think their story is like, I can't remember his name, and it's gonna bug me. It's the person that started railroads in the United States, or was like owning most of the railroads.
Mhm.
Not Rockefeller, the Vanderbilt. I'm so glad I remember. I
Yes.
totally would have
Yep.
forgot. So Vanderbilt basically said, like, if I complied with the government's policies, we wouldn't have railroads. We wouldn't be growing. So he was breaking the law,
Yeah.
knowing it 100% fine. And he was a billionaire, or today's days billionaire, right? He was one of the
Yeah.
richest people in the world. So someone's like, oh, that's so, like, he was so industrious in figuring out how to do it. I was like, yes, but if we did that today, people go to jail, right? If
Yeah.
you're, that's what it. You go to jail, you lose money. You can't just break the law to grow your business. However, in terms of these policies, which isn't really a law, it's more of like, okay, we'll slap you with a fine. They'll do it. It's going to happen, and that's not a good thing because then they get hacked, and then they
Yep.
lose money and people lose money. So, a happy medium. Government, let's find a happy medium.
Yes.
Speaking to the proverbial
Exactly.
government up there. Um, and so and I want to go back because as we're talking about all these different things, and we're talking about different companies and governments, and all those things are created by people, but we sometimes miss this. And you talked about making your company approachable by being able to humanize and speak to that, but like, can you go into depths of how you do that? Because I feel like it's a lot of technical rigor. It's a lot of technical stuff. Like, how do we balance the clarity? How do we express to, rather than saying just XYZ is necessary, you lose XYZ money, or if you have an audit, if you have a breach, how do you get that across, especially to small businesses? Because and before you answer that, could you tell us like roughly the average size of the businesses that you deal with?
Sure. I deal with organizations as small as four
Okay.
people, 3, 4 people, up to, several hundred. And then I have partners. I work with a lot of partners as well, and it might be a few thousand, um, 10, 20,000 people. So a little bit of everyone kind of, like I said, in that small to medium sized business. I really like working with the small businesses because they do need the help, and that's kind of what my goal is, to help organizations figure this out and kind of be that additional person and that resource for them as well. And then going to kind of your other question of how we kind of make it approachable and kind of speak to the clarity. A lot of it is, on me to do my research and figure out what the controls mean from a technical standpoint, and then just figuring out the best way of translating that into everyday language, so to say. So most people would understand that. And some of that's just how my brain works too. Like, again, I don't have a background in um, any of the technical stuff. So everything I know from a technical standpoint, it's self-learned and self-taught over the years. And so I've had to kind of internally figure that out and learn how to, so say, translate it
Mm-hmm.
myself. So that's why I try to take that, what I've learned over the years, and make it for other people where they can actually understand it as well. And then, like you said, it really does have to everything has to go up to upper management as well. They need to see, hey, we're making progress here, or we're not making progress here. And so it's also taking all of that, putting it into executive reports, so the executives can see how we are doing from a risk standpoint or how we're doing from a tool implementation standpoint as well. And learning what executives like has been a huge thing over the years. I think has helped as well.
All right. Well, I mean, I think I will say that even though, and we've talked about how like security gets overlooked because again, you don't make money from it. I think what you're doing for small businesses is huge because I think as time moves on, a lot of hackers go after whales, but slowly they're going to realize you just go after a few of the regular size fish, and you're doing the same thing. It's a lot easier. It's going to be a lot easier to
Yeah.
crack, a 200 person business than it is a 2,000 or 20,000 person business. And I think we don't, and it's also like not in the news as how often the smaller companies get hacked, but I'm
Yeah.
sure it happens like a lot. It has to, honestly, just the statistics.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure you're doing, for many of these people, you're doing God's work, right? And you're helping them understand, because I will say that when you start a business and most people in tech, I will say, I'll give them their props, that most people in tech understand compliance to a degree in terms within tech, but a lot of times when you go from being a person in tech into a business owner, that's not your forefront. You need to get, your product out, or you need to get the service out. And even though you know it in the back of your head, it's an extra, you don't want to spend the extra how many ever thousands of dollars, and it gets lost in the
Right.
sauce, right? Um,
Yep.
so,
Exactly.
all right. All right. So I want to know, what kind of leader are you? Let's talk about yourself outside of the technical work in terms of building this business, because again, business ownership is hard. It's been made glamorous by Mark Zuckerberg being a 20 whatever year old billionaire, and everyone's like, all right, we should all be business owners. But I think very much so, most people, because think about it, like right now the job market hasn't been great over the past few years, and a lot of people want to rage quit into a business, including myself. I thought about it. I was like, you know what? I just want to quit everything and buy something, and then just whatever.
Yeah.
So with all of that being said, even if in the beginning you're a solopreneur and then you go on to hire people, you have to lead yourself. I think the hardest part. Someone said this. The hardest part about being your own boss is being your own employee. And so it all starts with leadership one way or another. But right now, you have a business that's been around for quite a long time. You've been in the industry for as long as you've been. What kind of leader are you? What is your leadership philosophy or style?
Sure. Kind of going back to the example that we started at the beginning where I had a boss who made me be in my seat from 9 to 5. I am the opposite. I am one of those, I'm hands off unless there's an issue. So I do a lot of role assignments. I tell the people the due dates and I kind of let them do the job. For the most part, I might get a little antsy if I'm not seeing responses, after a certain amount of time. But I try to give them the time and the knowledge that they need to do the job, and then expect them to come to me if they have questions. If they're missing due dates, then that changes, and then I have to be a little bit more hands-on and project manage them a little closer. But I try to give them the leverage that they need to do their job and be successful in their job.
Yeah, is there a compliance like project management tool? Is there something specific where when you can track these things?
Yeah, we use Asana a lot for our project management tool internally. And so I have a admin who will set up the different projects. I'll help her put the due dates in there, and then we'll assign that. And then we use Slack for internal communication as well. All my employees are remote. So we just stay involved on Slack, and then we have at least weekly meetings, if not more frequently, to kind of touch base. For example, with my admin, I meet, 3 times a week. My salesperson, I meet a couple of times a week as well. So I have different touch points with them throughout the week as well. And then, like I said, I ping them on Slack if I need anything. And they're usually good about responding, when they're able to as well. So it works out pretty good so far.
Yeah, no, I think if you, so a few things is like, for me is like, I love in terms of project management, I'm very basic. I love Kanban boards where I like you could just move the little thing over and over. And I'm like, you don't have
Yes.
to text me. Like I remember I used to when I was managing a team, I used to do biweekly one-on-ones, and you'd do a team meeting on the other week. So I'd like see everyone's face, and every one-on-one, I had this one employee. She would just start reading everything she was doing, and I was like, I don't care. Not that I don't care that you're doing it. It's great. It's
Right,
great.
right.
I don't need
Yeah,
to know about it right now. I see
yeah,
that you know these tasks are being done on my end. I just tell me how you're doing. That's it, right?
yeah.
So I think that's great, and I think also there's two parts to it. One is hire well. If you hire well, if you're hiring people that are good at their jobs, you don't need to be standing behind them, because
Yep,
that if they're good at their jobs and you're doing that, they're gonna like what you did. They're gonna leave, right? And if they're
yep.
bad at their job, that's on you to either it's on you that you hired them, but now you have to build them up, right? That's a whole other thing.
Yes.
But the other thing is just give some ownership, and I think that's another thing where it's like if you give them ownership and they feel like they own that part of the business, it's their own self-respect, right? They're gonna do it for
Yep.
themselves, and that's great. Yeah, so that's awesome. And then, so your team's remote first. Your entire company's remote first. How has that
Yes.
been? So you
Yes.
started the business before COVID. Have you always been remote first?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I have. For my previous job that I left to start the business, I was already mostly remote, but I traveled a lot to kind of see the clients and stuff. But I was remote from my boss anyways, for at least a couple of years. So I just kind of got used to being remote, and then traveling when necessary. So the people I hired, were actually from referrals or people that I knew. So that's why I knew I was building a good team because I was hiring people that I trusted the reference and the referral from, which helped. And so most of the team I've seen, I try to see at least once a year in person just to hang out, have like team meetings. But I still have a couple of people I haven't actually met in person. We just meet on the phone all the time and Slack and everything. So it's been good. I need to do like a team building exercise, and maybe that's something I do this year or next year with the whole team. But that's definitely one of our business goals.
Yeah, do an offsite. Have a party. I mean, don't have to have a party, but
Yes.
yeah, that's awesome. I actually have acquaintance that he has a company called Offsite, and that's all they do is they just like plan offsites every year. And I'm like, that sounds you're
Oh,
like you're
nice.
just a very high end. I don't want to reduce it to call it a party planner, but it's like kind of right. It's like really cool.
It is.
Yeah,
Totally. Yeah. Like that's
it
really cool. I'll have to look
such
that
a great
up. Yeah, that'd be
business
fun.
model. Yeah. Um, so
Definitely.
okay, so I forgot to go back to what I wrote down, but I have it written down, so I'm not going to forget to go back there.
That's okay.
But before that, I do need to ask because we talked about you just said that you started your business pre-COVID and it was still remote first. How did COVID affect your business? How was that time that those first 2 years of? Because I'm sure the first thing to go out because like what happened, at least from my recollection, like January, February, March, COVID starts. 2 months of companies stopping everything that they're doing, holding their breath, and then going on like nothing happened, right? Kind of, sort of, in
Hmm.
terms of business, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
especially if you look at the stock market, like that's exactly what happened. And so
Yeah.
with all of that happening, when they started up again, because I'm sure the first things they stopped were like, okay, screw compliance right away. Um,
Yeah.
we don't even know if the company is going to be able to do anything. How did it affect your business? But then also, how long did it take for them to come back and be like, all right, we need to get back on the compliance train? Or was it different forever after COVID happened? Like, how was that?
Yeah, it definitely affected it at the beginning. I'd say the first couple months, like you said, were a little stressful, of like, what's going on? The budgets are tight, clients are dropping because again, they didn't know, nobody knew. So I would probably say maybe middle of that year, things started kind of slowly picking back up. At that point, I was doing a lot of FedRAMP technical documentation for a partner. And so they already had a lot of clients who were committed to selling their software to a federal agency, and they were still getting some funding. So I was able to work through that partner to help with a lot of technical documentation throughout the rest of that year and the following year, which worked out great since I was remote anyways. But yeah, I'd say it did take a little bit to kind of get back into the swing of things and for businesses to feel like okay, we do have the money to go back to this compliance and this policy procedure writing, and we have to do these audits again. So I think the biggest change is just not as much travel. I used to travel maybe 50, 60%
Wow.
of the time to be on site with the clients to do this sort of stuff. And now I travel maybe a handful of times a year. And most of that's to networking events and not to clients.
Yeah.
So I'd say 80, 90% of all my client work is actually over the phone and through meetings such as this now.
Yeah, it's kind of like so like even going back further, like think of um I remember one of my bosses was like, business has to be done face to face, right? And it's something
Yep.
probably that was said years ago, forever, right? But COVID really changed the thought process, and in a
Mhm.
sad way, it kind of pushed us apart even further because the telephone did that anyway.
Yeah.
But I think where it's like a lot of people were very adamant about. I remember I applied to a job once and I told the recruiter I was like, oh, like being remote would be nice. And this was 2019 or 18. And I got like, put me down for it. They're like, sounds kind of lazy, blah, blah, blah. And like, it was a lot. And I was in a
Yeah.
moment of reflection. I was like, am I like a horrible human being for wanting to be remote? COVID happens. And now it's like that thought process. Mind you, there's a lot of companies doing return to office. That's on them. Whatever they want to do, fine. But you don't have to. The word have to is gone now. Now it's like, this is
Right.
what we want. But you can't argue
Yep.
about anything about like, uh, you know, this is for being more productive or whatnot. All of those things have been debunked. And at this point now, you want people in the office, fine, right? That's great.
Yeah.
I just think it's so funny because even clients back in the day, I'm sure they were like, oh, you have to be on site for X amount of days if we're doing this,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's cute.
Yeah. Then yes. And then again, I would finish up early and I'm like, okay, I don't want them to think I'm twiddling my thumbs, but
Yeah,
we've gone through everything in 2 days and I'm scheduled here for 3 days,
yeah.
Like I said, I'm pretty quick at what I do, so it takes a while. But I did miss the human element sometimes of on-site visits. I feel like sometimes we miss those connections and just kind of building that rapport with each other because it's a little bit harder. I think it's a little bit harder
Hmm.
online if you're not even if you're doing video, it's great. You can see the facial expressions. But I mean, I remember just sitting in people's offices and looking around their room and being like, oh, we have a connection here because they have, a picture of their dog hanging on their wall. And so then I could, build a conversation and build that relationship a little bit more around the dog or where they went to school. So some of that I do miss. I think it's definitely changed through COVID. It's a little bit harder to kind of build those relationships and that rapport through the phone. So trying to find different ways of doing that. So you have suggestions.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because prior to right now I'm house sitting for my parents, but at my old apartment I had a couch behind where I sat, and I made sure anytime I had a video call, my dog Kobe was sitting there, because it's a conversation starter, and it is, and
Mhm. Yeah.
most people, I say that some people like dogs, right? I want to say most people. I hope
Yeah.
most people. So it's always like,
I hope
right, and
so.
but it's always like, oh, you have a dog. Oh my gosh, he's so cute,
Yeah.
right? As he sleeps, he's falling asleep over here. But so I think no, you're absolutely right, and it's very, because I know that back in the day when we would do like sales calls or we would go and meet people, you go out for lunch, you go out for a drink, and
Mhm.
you don't have to talk
Yep.
about business, right? You can talk about anything, and then
Yeah.
you all of a sudden, sports or family or travel, something comes up,
Hmm.
and it's
Yep.
very, especially if you're in a transactional relationship for the most part, it's very hard because it might be off-putting or it might be throwing something off to be like, oh, like tell me about your vacation plans. Like, whoa, like
Right.
calm down, right? Um,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
even sometimes like for me with like being on a podcast, I'm very much someone who loves to like randomly, like I've been dying to ask you about your dog because I know you have one because I was listening to the podcast, but I've been like holding it. I was
Yes.
like, all right, like I need to get be normal and not just talk about random stuff. Um,
No, I'd love
but
to talk about my
yeah,
dog.
and that's another thing. It's like when you're doing it, when you're selling something, the
Mhm.
person across, you don't know how excited the person across the screen is, and you might be excited to
Yep.
talk about their dog, but they're trying to get off the call because of whatever, right? So
Right.
yeah, COVID did take that from us, but I think we'll get back there. I think we'll figure it out. I think we're
Yeah.
we're figuring
I
it
think
out,
so.
right?
Yeah.
um
Exactly.
so okay, fine, since we mentioned it, tell me about your dog.
Well, I had to put her in daycare today, so she went like bark during the middle of our podcast. So, but she's awesome. Her name is Georgia. She's a Boykin Spaniel. Not many people have heard of a Boykin, but she's Boykin is like the South Carolina state dog. So
Okay.
she's all chocolate brown and super sweet, and she loves the couch. She lays on the back of the couch behind me. That's her favorite spot in the
Oh,
world.
that's so cute. How big is she?
So yeah. She's about 45 or 40
Okay.
pounds, so she's yeah, Like, I don't know how much you can see on the video, but she's big enough where you can pick her up, but she doesn't like being picked
Okay.
up. So, but she's a good lap
Oh,
dog.
that's awesome. Um, I
Yes.
think dogs are great. My Kobe's also chocolate brown. He's brown and white. And he's
Aw. I was gonna say, tell me about your
yeah,
dog.
he's a pit bull. He's a rescue,
Aw.
so he might be a mixed, but he's very pit
Okay.
bullish. Um, and
Yeah.
he's about 50 pounds, which makes him just too
Okay.
big to be a lap dog. But he thinks he's a lap dog at times, which is hilarious. When I first got him,
Yeah.
he would try to sit on me while I was on a computer chair, like on my desk, and
Oh
it
no,
was so
yeah.
his butt would be on the armrest, his face would be on the armrest, and he'd be
Yeah.
uncomfortable. But he's like, this is where I want to sit.
He's like, I gotta
Yeah,
be here.
and then when I came now at when my parents before they went to India for a bit, he loves to sit behind my mom, but he's too big. Like he can't. It's not, but
Aw.
that's where he wants to be. So my
Yeah.
mom's like, no,
Yeah.
don't make him move, and she's uncomfortable. So like there's no comfort.
Aw.
But no, I'm kidding. He's a sweet little boy. Um,
Oh, that's
yeah, it's great.
awesome.
And I was actually, so funny enough, my biggest nightmare happened not right before, but like 30 minutes before our call. My parents, it was like Groundhog Day for me. My parents, landscapers came because it's the first day of spring for me, because that's how I know it's spring, because they're here.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But it was the first day and I didn't know they were coming, and he's losing his mind. He's
Oh
running from
no.
one window to the other window, barking, and they're loud too. So I was like, oh man, like what
Yeah.
am I was genuinely stressed out for a while, but I bribed him. He got a treat, and that
Oh,
was
good.
fine.
Good. Good.
And then the
Yeah.
landscaper,
Treats are always great
oh yeah,
vibes.
it was yeah, robust time, and I try. He's a really really like tough chewer, and so I have to find like the hardest treats and just
Oh yeah.
can I give him rocks? I can't give him rocks. Okay, what's the next closest thing? And then the landscapers left. Anyway, that was our detour. I'm gonna jump. So the thing that I wrote down that I really want to know about, because I think we're in the beginning stages of AI being regulated to an extent. I don't think we're where we're going to end up yet. I don't know if we're going to get there, because a lot of people don't want to overregulate these things. Compliance in terms of AI. Are there frameworks for AI? Are they coming? Are they already here? And are people? Because I feel like only because of the film Terminator, compliance should be a thing for AI, because it can
Mhm. Yeah.
go somewhere that we don't know if it's going to go, and a lot of really
Right.
smart people are saying, "Oh no, it can happen," which is scary
Yeah.
as shit. But with that being said,
Yeah.
it is so useful that I think some
Mhm.
people are like, well, it'll happen, but we won't be here for it. So let the future deal with it, because right now it's making my life super easy. What does
Right.
AI compliance look like right now, and where are we heading?
Yes, there are a couple new standards out for AI. NIST has one that I think they put out maybe last year, and then ISO also has an AI standard. Again, that's fairly recent. I haven't had any interaction with either of those, or at least with the organizations looking to become AI compliant yet. I've heard rumors that, it's there's more organizations that are going to start putting those in place, but I haven't seen it personally yet. But yeah, I think it's good. I think there needs to be regulation around it, just because you don't know where that data is going, especially if like clients are using it. There needs to be internal policies around how their employees are using it. Like, don't dump all our sensitive data into this AI tool that you don't know where where it's going on the
Yeah.
back end. So there needs to be some internal policies around, hey, this is what you could do with AI, this is what you can't do with AI. And then I actually got a contract recently where in the contract for me to do work, they specifically said you can't use AI to do anything for this project. So I'm seeing it all around, seeing the regulation. I'm out there by the NIST and the ISO. I'm seeing where they need to kind of manage it internally for organizations. And then it's affecting me, like I said, from a contractual standpoint, if I were to use AI, some of them require me not to. So it's been interesting watching the landscape change.
I feel like when it comes to data and AI, it's I wonder how hard it would be to like somehow silo the data. Because like for me, if I have an AI tool, I would love for me to put my entire life's information into it for my use, right?
Mhm.
So that I
Yeah.
can, ask it to do whatever I need it to do, even like do like stock trades and like bank account stuff. Like I'd love that. But I wanted to stop
Yeah.
at my house. I don't want it to go out.
Right.
But at the same time, I understand that the tool does need some data to help the overallness of the tool. So like, can we figure out a silo
Mhm.
that, and again, those things eventually, if they are made, can get hacked, and then you're screwed. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, it's, we'll see, but it's definitely coming. But let's see where it ends up, and because some people really just care about how easy their lives get, and that's all that really matters to
Yeah.
them. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
um, all right, that's AI. All right, so. Oh, can you? This is not such a fun question, but I am curious. What would you say is your favorite failure in this business so far? What is something that was maybe a stumbling block, or something that happened that eventually you look back on it, you're like, I'm glad it happened, or it sucked, but it happened, and now I'm better for it. Whatever that may be.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think kind of going back to, I said one of my biggest things I wish I had learned at the beginning was not putting all my eggs in the basket. I think when that major contract just stopped sending me work, as a partner I had, they just stopped sending me work
Mm-hmm.
randomly. And they were providing probably 80% of my work at that moment in time. That was definitely a fail. But it led me to rebrand. It made me to kind of rethink my business structure. And I'm still kind of coming back from that, if I'm being honest, but it really has been pushing me outside my box to network even more, attend conferences, kind of learn not to put all my eggs in one basket. And then, like I said, we totally rebranded my company name, my website, hired a business coach, the whole nine yards. So it's been a good learning experience from that one failure. So I, it is what it is, but it's helped me change and hopefully become a better person, better business manager out of it.
Yeah, those there's many times where you look back at failure, like I wish it didn't happen, but if you think about it, like if those things
Yeah,
happened later, it would be significantly harder to like overcome, and it's like it
correct.
sucks, but
Yeah,
we made it through. And
exactly. Yes, we're still
yeah,
here.
exactly. So you said you mentioned a business coach, and you mentioned when you first started, you had a manager who was she was a woman, and she helped you navigate mentorship in
Yeah.
what you're doing right now. How important is it? Do you have is your business coach your mentor? Do you have other mentors? And how have you utilized mentor? Because I feel like it's something that in general isn't talked about enough in tech, and I think a lot of successful people have people coaching them. And when you look at professional sports, there's people that are extremely good at what they do, but they still have coaches, right? So, how
Yeah.
have you utilized mentorship in your career?
Yeah, like I said, as you mentioned, when I first got into the IT auditing, I had a great mentor who took me under her wing, and I was even after I left that job, I was in contact with her for years, and still talk to her every now and then. So she was great to kind of get my feet wet in the industry, and then just kind of help me through any of those major questions I had as I was trying to figure out my way. And then, yeah, a couple of years ago, like I said, I hired a business coach who's been a good mentor as well. She was in the tech industry and now she's kind of focused on growing businesses, stuff like that. But she's good to have to ask questions because as a business owner, you wear so many hats and not everything is my forte. So it's been good to kind of bounce questions off somebody else who might have a little bit more experience on just kind of like some of the business growth or some of the sales aspects, because that's my area that I don't do well in. Um, and just give me ideas and push me outside my comfort zone a little bit more than I probably would myself. And so in reverse, I try to give that back. Like I said, I'm a mentor to several other women through the Women in Cybersecurity program. And so I try to be full circle and give it back to others to help them as people have helped me.
I love that. Yeah, we need. I think everyone needs a little push because it's so easy to be in the comfort zone, and then also
Yes.
no one that's not actually a salesperson is good at sales. Sales is the bane of most
Yeah.
people's existence. Um, and sometimes it'd be
Yes.
nice to just hire a person, and that would be the end of it. But it's not. There's other stuff that needs to be done.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's great to be pushed and to push others. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I asked you about your favorite failure. Can you tell me now about your favorite client story, a time that you guys saved the day? What was because we talked about your aha moment, but what's now your new favorite client story for Cadra?
Oh, that's a good question. I think just helping people through their audits and the technical documentation that they probably wouldn't have. Um, technical documentation is interesting in that not everyone knows how to do it, especially when it comes to like FedRAMP and writing SSPs. So I'd say probably some of my favorite client memories or successes are helping them finish that document on time because they need to deliver it to their federal agency and their auditor. And they just didn't know where to start. And so being able to come in and be like, I got this. I'll help you get there. And then just kind of interacting with them throughout the process, I think are probably some of my favorite
Yeah,
memories.
a lot of people don't realize like how special being on time is and how often deadlines are pushed
Yeah.
back and like how that's almost a norm and being able to do it on time is
Yes.
definitely a huge win. Um,
Yes.
all right. So as we're approaching the wrap up, I'm going to do what we call as the FAQs, frequently asked questions.
Okay.
But they're usually different every time, so they're not really FAQs, but I call them FAQs.
Okay.
So here we go. All right. So um, this is a dumb one. I do research and then I write stuff in kind of like a I'm just zoned out and I'm just going at it. And then I look back sometimes
Right.
and I'm just like, I don't know if this is a great question. I'm going to ask it for my past self because my past self did
Okay.
work and he deserves validation. What's
Okay.
scarier? This is so stupid. A surprise audit or a surprise Zoom call?
Oh, I'd have to say
Yeah,
audit.
I assumed you would. Mind you, though, I do
Yeah.
hate surprise Zoom calls. Surprise Zoom calls are
Yeah.
because it's like sometimes I'm not like I need to go like find different clothes or like or something.
Yep, exactly.
Um,
Yeah, I'm like a Zoom call, you don't have to be on
yeah,
video, so that would be my only thing there.
yeah,
Like if I had to be now, if you qualified that and said a surprise Zoom call where you have to be on video, I don't know that might have
yeah.
put it over the edge.
I actually have this like fear that so my Zoom set up that my camera's off when I come online, but my fear is it won't be the case and it'll just turn on like randomly.
Yeah.
So I like yeah. Anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Oh, I have a camera cover that I flip
Yeah,
down,
yeah,
so
yeah. No, and so again, it's like, did I do it? Did I do it right? Anyway, it's a whole thing.
right, yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah, I totally understand.
what's a cybersecurity buzzword or compliance buzzword that you secretly can't stand?
Hmm, that's a good question. Let's see. I don't know if I could think of one.
Which means they're all useful, which is fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of buzzwords now.
It's usually as long if you can't think of
Yeah.
one, that's a good thing because that means all the words used
Okay.
in cybersecurity and compliance are useful words, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe checkbox. I think we talked about checkbox quite a few times. I think checkbox is one that, I think we talked about it is, people are like, oh, you have to just check the box to have compliance. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. So yeah, we'll go with
yes,
checkbox.
that's for sure. Um, if yeah anyway yeah that I think that's something that it's a culture thing that overall if we can figure out how to start with the end in mind that doesn't exist. It's like it's just doing your job. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
um one thing people think is secure that totally isn't. So something that I'm not sure where I was going with that, but is there something that comes to mind?
I mean, you could always say data, like you don't know if the data is secure or not. Um, or proper access controls, I think are probably like the biggest thing. Because people just don't go back and
Hmm.
check to make sure that people got removed or people got terminated and left or they're on maternity leave and they're out for several months. I'd say probably access controls are a big thing that might not be in place
Yeah, I was
properly.
gonna say because like I feel like IAM is just sometimes like there are things that I should not be able to log into. Like I remember,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say this out loud. Actually, there was something I shouldn't have had access to after a certain point of my life of time,
Hmm.
and I had access for like a year, and it was just
Oh, yeah.
there, and I was just like, well, this someone didn't do their
Yep.
job. Um, yeah,
Yep.
and I think that happens more often
Exactly.
than not because I think again,
Yeah.
um, you you don't always unless your system's set up the right way, you don't always get a light like, oh, this person's leaving, right? And then it's just another URL in the in your system. Um,
Yep.
all right. Oh, what's the weirdest thing you ever had to explain to a client?
Um, this is years ago, but I went to a client. I think in like backwoods Tennessee, and I was asking him how he destroyed his hard drives, and he held it up, and it had a bullet through it. He just took his hard drives out
Wow.
and shot them. That's how he destroyed it. I was like, okay, that doesn't quite meet what we expect, but
I will say,
I guess it's not
I get
recovered,
that though.
recoverable.
I do understand that
Yeah.
stress. Like, there are
Yes.
many times I wanted to shoot my computer. Well, actually, not this one. This new baby is
Yeah.
new and she's wonderful. But my old computers, um, yeah, that's amazing. That's a great story. Um,
That's one of my favorites. I was like, I can't help it, but
I would have taken that hard drive should be like framed. Such a cool. Anyway,
I know. I should have had
yeah,
I
right.
known.
All right, and then okay, so these actually are ones I ask a lot because these I think are cool. So, what is the best advice you ever got in any aspect of life, industry, work, anything?
I think just be yourself. At the end of the day, I think there are people who try to be someone they're not, and you're not going to make it if you're trying to be someone that you're not at that point in time. So just be yourself. This is probably some of the best one I
It's the
got.
most underrated advice, and when you hear it for the first time at the age of whatever 16, you hate it. It's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
This is so dumb, but it's the most true advice. I love that. Best investment you ever made?
Um, right now, probably hiring like an admin to help me with project management and some of the sales stuff. She was helping me and some of the operations, just some of that stuff to take off of my plate. I'd say she's awesome. So I definitely say that right now.
Wonderful. And what is the best gift you've ever been given?
Oh, hmm, that's a tough question. Like, try to come up with a creative answer.
Doesn't have to be creative.
I, um, I would say I get like tickets to the theater. I think that's one of them. Um, I was trying to think. Yeah, I'd say probably tickets to see like some of my favorite plays or I love Harry Potter. So I think probably seeing Harry Potter at the oh yay Gryffindor. I'm Hufflepuff.
So I have a fight. So this was given to me by a friend. I think I'm a Slytherin, but she said I was a Gryffindor. So I was.
Well, you have to do the official test.
Yeah,
There's only one way to know.
yeah. The official test says I'm a Gryffindor too. It's not that I don't want to be a Gryffindor. It's great to be a Gryffindor,
You,
but I just
yeah, you just really want to
I'm
be Southern
ambitious.
and be
I'm no,
different.
I'm like I'm not I'm not saying that I'm Harry or anything, but like I got both sides going on. So
Yeah, yeah, I like it.
no theater. That's awesome. I think, and I still haven't seen The Cursed Child, mostly because I read the novel, I read the play,
Yeah,
and I didn't love it. And even though everyone tells me
yeah,
that but the theater experience is incredible for that, I still anyway. I'll get there. Um,
yeah. It's definitely different. I mean, it was good. It was good. Don't
yeah.
get me wrong, but
But I
it
hope
was
she comes
different.
out and says it's not canon and she writes something else because
Yeah,
it's not the story's
I
not
know.
good. I'm sorry. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's unnecessary. Anyway, I digress. I can complain about Harry. If we were talking about Harry, if I knew you liked Harry Potter earlier, this would be like a 4 hour long conversation because I can for
Oh man, I'm like I could talk about it all
all
day.
day.
Yeah.
I have like four copies of all the novels. Like I have a problem. Anyway,
Oh
uh,
man, that I don't think there's such a
yeah.
thing.
No, I actually oh, hang on. I won. I went to this Harry Potter trivia, and I won this. I can't. You can't read it. It's
Oh, nice. No, I can't really see it.
hang on. I can't.
Oh, that's really cool.
So it was
Oh, I
it was
like
me and
it.
one friend, and she was too drunk, and it was me and her, and we were facing teams of
Yeah.
like 7, 8, 9 people at this bar, and I won.
Oh
So
my
we got that,
goodness.
and then we got a $50
Yes.
gift card to the place. So we came back for brunch later on,
Oh,
but it was just
nice.
me versus the world, and I was killing it. I fucking killed it. Yeah,
Obviously.
it was insane.
Man, you know your Harry
I
Potter. I'm
I'm
impressed.
such a yeah. I love good stories. So for me right now, it's like Harry Potter's my
Yeah.
favorite thing growing up. Right now, like my favorite novel as an adult is a series called Red Rising, and another
Yep.
series called Dungeon Crawler Carl. Those are like the three best works of literature of the last two generations, considering not real generations, but just like 20-year blocks.
Yeah.
Anyway, because
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings is great too. Anyway,
Yes.
okay, you get to put one thing on a billboard. I love how this is supposed to be rapid fire, but I'm taking my time with it. Anything
That's
you want to
fine.
put on a billboard, it could be a quote, it could be a word, it could be a phrase, a paragraph, anything for millions of people to see.
Oh goodness. I think you are good enough. Um, just reminding people that they are good at what they do and good at who they are. I think people just need that reminder. I need that reminder. I have it written on my desk over here, though, which is why it came to my mind. So it's like you are good enough.
I love that, and that's absolutely true. I think imposter syndrome gets most of us, and it's
Mhm.
an unnecessary killer. I think some people need it. Some people that are
Yes.
too arrogant sometimes, but very few. Most of the people are
Yeah.
not. 99.9% are not.
Yes.
And then what is something you changed your mind about in the last year?
Mm, probably, I'd say probably like different goals. I think I had set out for myself at the beginning of the year. I think I already changed. So I'd say probably
It's
goals.
always good to readjust, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So so as we're wrapping up, where can people get to know
Yeah.
more about you, more about Cadra? Where do we find you?
Sure. We have a website, www.cadra, cadra.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, for a personal account. And then, yeah, maybe people can reach out through either way to get a hold of
Awesome, and I'll
us.
put that in the show notes. And then as we wrap up, is there anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I don't think so. I think just reminding that compliance is important. It's more than the check a box. It doesn't always seem necessary, but it is at the end of the day because it affects your clients, it affects your internal employees, it affects, your business at the end of the day. So trying to figure out that cost to you and make sure that you have some sort of cybersecurity compliance in place. So
All right, awesome. So thank you for listening, everybody, and just remember that compliance is important.